Hey, curious cuties. Welcome to Curio City. I'm your host, Lauren Deliri, and today you're in for a riveting conversation with Mattie Jo, actor, author, and self-proclaimed shameless oversharer. From her roots as a pastor's kid and a purity ring wearer to navigating the wild and diverse landscape of New York City, Mattie Jo shares her explosive journey of deconstruction and self-discovery. We dive into her blog turned book, God, Sex, and Rich People, explore her spiritual evolution, and laugh and maybe cringe at her unforgettable New York City dating stories. With her book launch on the horizon and a TV series in development, Mattie Jo gives us an unfiltered look at what it means to live authentically and unapologetically. Keep listening for a candid and inspiring conversation. Can you share more about your transition from, being a pastor's kid and a purity ring wearer to your life in New York City? Like, what were some of the biggest challenges and surprises?
My faith wasn't just a part of my life. It was my life. It was my entire identity. I took it very seriously. It was very personal to me, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people who don't grow up in it don't really understand. They think like, oh, you just behaved this way because you were indoctrinated. And it's like, well, yes. And it was important to me. And I do talk about I think there's this when you're younger, actually, you do have this purity of heart that allows you to more easily access divinity. And then unfortunately, the church sort of capitalizes on that and exploits it. Right. And so I do believe that I had this beautiful relationship with God that was actually very pure, not purity culture, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just and so then, I was starting to move away from aspects of what I had grown up with when I went to college, because I went to college for theater. So my first blog post was God and the Gays, because it was how the LGBTQ community was sort of the catalyst for me questioning what I had learned in church. Because I was seriously, what I'm knowing about these people, what I'm learning about them, this does not line up with what's going on or what my pastors are telling me. It's just not true. And then that was sort of the beginning of me learning, oh, it's so much easier to discriminate against a label versus a person and a heart. And the more that you are exposed to people that were previously just labels, the more that stuff just starts to unravel. So then I moved to New York City, and all I do is encounter people who were just labels, namely, lots of people who are not Christian, and not just not Christian, actively other religions, whereas I didn't have that before. And so when I was, moving to New York, I always say my first apartment in New York City was more diverse than all of Missouri. I was living with a guy who was born and raised in New York City, Jewish guy, a woman who was raised between India and New York, and then a woman who was, agnostic and was raised in Sweden. And it's just by being there, just that situation alone kind of forced me to realize, oh, all of this sort of Christianese and all of these sort of pillars of truth I was taught don't really translate outside of a certain culture. Never mind dating, right? So my joke is always that my entire identity imploded thanks to Tinder and my Jewish roommate, because I was going on these dates and I really thought, just like it is in Missouri, that these guys in their early 20s would be trying to lock it down, trying to get married. And it was quite the opposite, much to my surprise. And people think I'm joking, but I'm not. I genuinely thought I would move to New York and I'd get married within 2-3 years max. Yeah. And that it had to be that because I was not going to be a virgin, for however much longer. So then when none of them were trying to get married and none of them had the same track as the typical, go to a coffee shop, swap testimonies, all of that, I was just what is going on? I was just I truly thought that I would just take my, preset that I had before, my identity, and it would just plop in New York and I just carry on with my life. Instead, I was forced to question a lot of these things, again, just by existing, that I was told were pillars of truth that were really only true in a certain subculture.
I'm curious, like the Jewish roommate situation, how is that personally? I can see how the Tinder thing affected that, but What about your Jewish roommate? Like, how did that affect you?
So, first of all, like he's kind of the catalyst for like the rich people aspect of my story. So my blog is God, Sex, and Rich People. My book is God, Sex, and Rich People. So through a series of like very strange events that you can read about in the book or whatever, I ended up not living in like a grungy, gross 5-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom, like most new New Yorkers. I actually ended up living in like a penthouse apartment on the Upper West Side.
Wow.
4-bed, 4-bath. We had a cleaning lady, a doorman, like fancy schmancy, which I believed I got because, you know, of my commitment to the Lord and still being a virgin. And so, you know, I really truly believed like I was getting gifted this because the Lord loved me so much. And really, my brother, because I got it through a friend of a friend for my brother, and he goes, "No, you got that apartment because I did cocaine in college."
Oh my gosh.
That's funny. I was like, oh my God, perspective matters.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, so it wasn't just the culture shock of like him being Jewish, but the culture shock of like living with the 1% and like all of that. Right. And, you know, sort of being in this world that Republicans and like conservative culture love to idolize, and they're sort of all aspiring to it. And I'm like, once I lived in it, I was like, y'all are never getting here. Like the Christians have not figured this out. The Jewish people have, because they have like ownership over all of this real estate, like whatever. So I learned about like some of those, like, I guess like Jewish people tropes of being like really good with money and whatever. But the reason I say my Jewish roommate is because I would come home to him after, you know, these dates or whatever. So I have this one story that I tell where I come home and I'm having like an equally yoked panic attack because this guy that I've met who I think is really cool, I just have found out he's Jewish. And he's like, so him being Jewish is a problem. And I didn't know Andrew was Jewish at the time. And that was my roommate. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine moving forward with someone like when our faith backgrounds are just so different. And he was like, because that's important to you. And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't marry a Mormon. And he goes, yeah, because Mormons are like crazy. They believe crazy stuff. And I was like, and I could tell he was mocking me. And I was like, I mean, do you know what they believe, Andrew? Like, you get your own planet, you know, holy underwear. I start listing off all this stuff. He goes, no, I get it. Like, Christians get miracles. Everyone else gets stuff they made up. And it was like stuff like that over time that he would bring up to me. And he would like, and then he like, recommended certain books to me. So my first sort of unraveling of religious truths was Zealot by Reza Aslan. And then it just sort of went from there. And Andrew actually knew the New Testament really well. So he could like banter with me pretty well. And yeah, that's why I say that, because he strangely had this understanding of where I was coming from while also pointing out the fallacy and hypocrisy of my views. Yeah. So yeah.
I love that. It's so nice to have somebody in your life like that, for sure.
Yeah. And he always did it in a way that made me go,
that made you think, oh my God.
It. Yeah. Like, oh crap. And it would be really self-reflective. And he wasn't like mean about it, you know, but he was just little quips like that. And I'd be like, oh shit.
Made you think. Yeah. I love that. It's really important. So, and when you wrote your blog post, God and the Gays, like you mentioned, the theater was like really inspiring, having probably lots of friends who are gay. And how did it feel at that time to share such a personal journey publicly? I would assume for the first time at that time.
Yeah. So that was 2015.
Okay.
Crazy. I was 25. So, you know, I always sort of say when people are like, tell me about like, how did you start your blog? Or what was that? I'm like, it was so flippant. There was no thought that went into it at all. I was just like, marriage equality passed. I'm having these experiences. I'm just going to write about them. Yeah. Also, my dad and my mom were going through a really heartbreaking, what I call like a divorce with our church that we had been part of for 15 years. And so I think part of me was angry for my own journey, but also angry for them. Yeah. And I really wanted to shout at people and who were like mistreating them and point out their hypocrisy. And so totally. I think it was a combination of anger at my own journey, wanting to sort of stand up for them, and then also sort of show off I was 25, right? So I was like, I just want to show off all of these woke things I have going on. Yeah. And then I was, and totally. I wasn't really afraid of the pushback because I was so far removed. Like I was removed geographically. I do always say I recognize that privilege that I had in my what is now called deconstruction. I called it dismantling. It's all the same. Because that wasn't my entire community anymore. And I had a separation from it. So I wasn't as afraid as I can understand other people being to talk about that publicly.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. There's a lot of people who, like I said, listen to the podcast who have like kind of been through that. And I think, being able to be geographically, even though that's like in the world of the internet, like anybody can come after anything you say or post, whatever, it does kind of help to have like your own little world separate from it. I was in the Christian music industry and I kind of imploded my entire career.
Yeah. I will say in 2015, social media was very different. It was really still just your friends and family. Yeah. And maybe people you would meet out and about. This whole going viral, things like that weren't really a thing yet.
Totally.
So I think there was also safety in that because I have since posted things on TikTok that have gotten on like the wrong side of TikTok, Trump talk. And that I don't do well. And I know they're just like idiots with like a cat as their, profile picture, but I still don't take it well. So I don't know if I would have done so well with the current internet back then. But anyway, totally. I don't think there wasn't a huge, big plan for it. I just wanted to share stories about what was going on in my life. I mean, I think one of the opening line of God and the Gays is, I know there's just absolutely no other white woman on the planet who thinks her journey is so exceptional she should share it on the internet. But right. So I sort of would make fun of myself in that way of like, I know this isn't special, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I also didn't consider myself a writer. So I don't think I took it very seriously.
Yeah. You're just sharing your thoughts.
Just sharing my thoughts. And in a way, I think I wanted to be a bit braggy because like I said, like I was living this cool, exciting life in New York City and like hooking up with like Broadway stars and like getting hit on by movie stars and like,
it's like a little memoir of your own life.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's essentially what it was, sprinkled with, because it was the memoir, all of these lessons I was learning. Like I have a blog post called Almost Famous by Association that is about it's a chapter in my book. It's also a blog post. But anyways, it's about this Broadway movie star guy who was interested and tried to have sex, basically. That's what it came down to. And I said no, because I was like, I want him to consider me marriage material. And then he just didn't ask me out again. And I was like, wait a second. My withholding sex was supposed to make him more interested. And so I started unraveling those narratives too. Like, wait, so if sex, I think the line I say is, if withholding sex isn't going to make a guy interested, then I just said, fuck it all. And then I quite literally fucked it all. And, and so it was things like that I was coming up against. And I was doing this all while my friends were all getting married. Right. So I wanted to be like, yes, I'm the single, exciting one. I think if anything, there was an intention of just wanting to show that my path was valid too. That's how it started. But then as it grew, it was really more about sharing my journey of just how insidious and cellular this purity culture evangelical stuff really is. And hoping that that would help others. Because at the time, there wasn't this massive movement around it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And now your God, Sex, and Rich People is a book. You're like working on a book. So like, or not working on it, but it's going to be coming out really soon.
Yeah, September 10th.
That's very exciting. Yeah. Okay, and then we also have a TV series adaptation. So tell us about that, like, and how it came to be selected for the, what was it? The Yale Innovation Summit? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, the blog and sort of how it came to be was fully accidental. I started writing it in 2015 and just by, you know, friends and family and whatever. I mean, literally I would go to auditions and people that I didn't even really know would be like, oh my God, I read your blog. So I noticed that it was like getting this traction. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then 2016 happened, which of course brought Sir Donald Trump into the world and then put evangelical suddenly on everyone's news brief. And it became a household term that people didn't really know before. And then all while the whole Donald Trump thing was happening and everybody was like, you know, everybody else was sort of saying, how could this happen? These people are supposed to be Christian. How can they support this? I was like, you guys, I can see exactly how this happened. This is the stuff I've been calling out for the last like over a year, you know, publicly on this blog. So then I'm trying to think. So just to be clear, this is sort of a sidebar, but the God, Sex, and the rich people aspect of it was the setting in which all of my deconstruction was taking place because I was living with the 1%, right? But I was also working with them as a personal assistant, as a babysitter. So rich people were sort of this very unexpected container for my identity crisis. So it's like, yes, while I'm very confusedly trying to figure out my faith, I'm also figuring out why, you know, women who don't have a job or any kids need a personal assistant. Because that's a rich person thing. Or like why women who don't have jobs need babysitters.
That's an interesting
like every single day. You
That's
know?
an interesting way to put it, like the container in which you deconstructed. Because I think, everybody's container is a little different. Like personally, mine was newly married and then my sister quit the band that we were in. And so my whole life imploded. It's like I was in love and crazily in love and had honestly not even that long ago had been in another relationship and had been engaged. So I was like kind of went from that relationship to finding the love of my life. And then my band, which was my career and identity, completely falling apart. And so I think mine was like newly married on a little island was my container.
Yes, it was just like culture shock from every angle. Then actually right after Donald Trump was elected in 2016, like I think it was like 3 days after, I experienced date rape. And so then, and that catalyzed a whole other like second chapter. Like I felt like I had done all of this work around deconstructing my faith and my sexuality. And then this thing happened that then I ended up getting help through Planned Parenthood. They connected me with I have a whole bunch of blog posts about this, which I never thought I would write about publicly. I was like, once that happened, I was like, I'm done. I'm not writing about this anymore. I will never write about this because the thoughts I had was like, you know, everyone is going to tell me, well, what did you expect? As if writing about sex makes it okay that someone raped me, you know, but like sort of all the narratives around like you asked for it and all of that was like, I will never be able to tell my family because they'll just say, well, duh, what did you expect? Yada, yada. But then Me Too happened. And so then through, you know, I got sexual trauma therapy through the help of a nonprofit that Planned Parenthood connected me to. And through sexual trauma therapy, I started to learn all of the very minute ways that I still was not even privy to that purity culture and evangelicalism were still showing up in my life. I mean, and I still see that therapist to this day. And he even pointed out like, for a long time, one of the things he saw come up with me is I always needed an outside authority to approve of my decision making. And that's a very much a religious thing, right?
Totally.
So in little ways like that and learning how to work through all of those. So then that opened up a whole other chapter of like, okay, I can share about this publicly. Me Too happened. I'm having all these experiences. So my writing actually just got better and better. And so I kept just doing it. And I started working with a career coach who helped me sort of channel all of my creative stuff, because I'm also an actor, to make like a very personal to Mattie Jo professional career, creative career path for me.
Yeah.
And then so that lands us in 2020. And I'm like, I guess now I should write a book.
Yeah.
I've been writing this blog. I have nothing but time. God, sex, and rich people are three things that America loves to be entertained by. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
No.
And God, I mean, evangelicalism is everywhere in our news cycle constantly. So if you could help people like better understand how this system is so powerful in America, like down to the individual's like psyche, then, I do think that that's helpful, because I think people who didn't grow up in it really can't conceptualize it.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Yeah. I agree. Now, with you and your personal experience, I'm curious, like how your understanding of spirituality and of wellness has evolved since leaving evangelicalism.
When my source of spirituality or spiritual authority was always on the outside of me, there was always this need for approval, of performing for that being to approve of me. The biggest thing I learned in my deconstruction is the work of deconstruction is to integrate. Because what evangelicalism does so well is it severs us from ourselves. It's like evangelicalism equals self-severance, right? You can't trust yourself. I tell people, one of the biggest misconceptions about being raised religious is that Satan is the enemy. No, you are the enemy.
Right.
Your selfish ambition, right? Like your inherent, original sin, right? We're born bad. As little babies, we're just born bad. And then we need things on the outside of us for the rest of our lives to make us good. And in my work, I realized that I needed to reintegrate. I needed to learn how to bring all parts of me together, to not look at myself as isolated categories where, the sex is bad, but then like my intellect is really good or whatever. Nope, it's all good. And I'm going to learn how to have a great relationship with all of it. Yep. And so what I realized in that is that I was so awful to my body. I never, ever, ever once said a nice thing about my body to myself. My body was bad. It was a thing that was in the way. I used to tell people like, I can't wait to die and go to heaven just so I don't have to deal with my body anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sad.
And so then for me, I had to learn how to literally like positive affirmations, like say nice things, catch the thought and replace it with a different one. And then by doing that internal work, then I slowly, started to treat myself better. And then I didn't want to binge drink as often. I wanted to like scale back and then go to yoga the next morning, And then so I developed a gym practice. I started going to the gym it was like 20 minutes at a time, 5 days a week when I first started. And then the next year I bumped it up to like full weight training, only with dumbbells for like 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Like everything was very slow. But then I went through a rapid body transformation, but really it was an internal transformation. And I was able to heal my eating disorder, like years long eating disorder, battles with anorexia, bulimia, over-exercising. And it's not that I still don't battle with it, but I have the tools now to reconfigure all of it and come back to, okay, what is the integration process here? Right. And staying present with myself, because again, so much of the evangelical, effectiveness is just desensitizing you to any sort of sensation and feeling, right? Everything is vilified. So, just staying present with that, because I noticed my first probably 4 years of having sex, I was constantly dissociating. I was not there. I knew I was having sex, but I don't really know any of the details. And and then I realized how often I was using alcohol to not be present. And then so I started to say, like, okay, I'm not going to be drunk for sex ever. I'm going to be fully present. And my boyfriend even said something the other night that was like, I said something about like being a good lover. And he was like, yeah, but when you're having like a one night stand, you're not thinking about being a good lover. And I was like, well, maybe not you, but if I'm going to have sex, it's going to be good. So that's why I learned to gauge when I actually wanted to participate in sex. And the only way I could do that is if I was fully present with myself. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
it definitely does.
All of that was really important to me. And then I think my spirituality, I think I still long for a deeper connection with the divine, but it looks different. Like last night I went on a walk in Central Park and I found this really quiet part of the park and it was all lit up with fireflies. And I just sat there for like an hour. Yeah. I think that's what my spirituality looks like more.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. It's very similar for me. I think a lot of people don't fully recognize how your spiritual journey oftentimes does lead to, like, it kind of bleeds into wellness, because so many of us, who have come out of evangelicalism, who have deconstructed, dismantled, whatever, a lot of us were really taught to be disembodied a lot and to not trust your body, like you're saying. And so spiritual healing a lot of the times comes with you're healing your relationship with your body, because that's like the biggest severance that we had. So like spirituality and wellness. So even talking like in the year that we are in now, like 2024, when I talk about, what it is I talk about on the podcast, even I'm like spirituality, wellness, like it's all kind of the same to me. And what's good for you spiritually is often good for you physically and vice versa. Like you just, sitting on a park bench and you were just, watching the fireflies and whatever, it's like, that's good for you spiritually, but it's also good for your nervous system. And that like they work together, like they work in tandem. What's going to be connecting you to, something other, something like bigger, also usually benefits you in a very physical, down to earth, bodily way. And so I love that that's like something that you talk about, and a lot of people just don't realize that that's a huge aspect of spiritual healing, especially when coming from evangelicalism.
Yes. And it is also so interesting what evangelicalism decides is important about the body, right? Like they're so, pun intended, hell-bent on sexual purity, but like they're not gonna shame anyone out the door or tell them that they are scarred for forever or they're a chewed up piece of gum if they have McDonald's 3 times a week for breakfast, or if they go to a gas station and drink a 42-ounce Mountain Dew every day.
Right.
Like, no one's getting shamed for that. It's so interesting what they decide is actually important about your body. Right. Yeah. And then also, again, like they're going to shame you for sexual acts, but they're not going to help you speak positively to yourself about yourself. Right. Because they don't actually want you to feel empowered. They want you to feel disempowered so they can tell you what to do, so that you have to outsource all of your knowing at all times and feel lost without it.
Right. So then what advice then would you give to someone who's currently questioning their faith or going through like a similar journey of deconstruction?
It is textbook, the grief cycle. You are going through grief. And I think Rachel Held Evans says in one of her books, no one talks about the grief of experiencing the death of your religion. Like it is as impactful as losing a loved one or whatever, closer, because you're losing yourself. Like, at least I know for me, I felt so angry because I just felt like I had been lied to. Like, who were these grownups in my life who just didn't tell me the full truth.
Right.
How dare you? And that anger is so justified.
Yeah.
But trust that it's an important part of the process, and try not to burn any bridges in the process as well.
That's
Give
hard.
yourself, right, totally, especially when like your friends and family are not supportive of it at all. But this is another tool, is, something we learn in high control groups, is to overshare. That every part of our lives is someone else's business, simply because we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And that's just absolute bullshit. I will tell you right now, not everyone is entitled to your life. And this is something I hear from so many people going through deconstruction, is once they stop sharing so personally, well, then what do they get? Shame. Oh, well, you're not sharing with us because you're ashamed of what you're doing. And therefore, if you're ashamed of it, you're feeling convicted. And that's why because at least in my experience, if you weren't openly sharing every detail about your life with your Bible study leader or whatever, then they would tell you you're feeling convicted. And the reason you're feeling convicted is because what you're doing is wrong. And so these things that are actually normal boundaries for everyone else, they're in religious groups, they don't exist because, again, it's part of the control aspect.
So true. Yeah.
So it's little things like that. And then also, just to the best of your ability, give yourself and others in your circles the grace that you were taught only Jesus gives.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give it to yourself in all of your struggles and all your unknowing and all of your confusion. And then also give it to your friends and family who just aren't going through what you're going through. Like, I remember my mom said to me one time when I was like in the throes of reading all of these textual criticism books, all of this stuff about biblical history and yada, yada. And she was like, well, she said something along the lines of like, I don't need to know all the facts. Like, that's why there's faith. And I'm like, no, Mom, there's faith because you have to believe in something unseen, not faith in things we actually do know.
So that you can close your eyes and jump off a cliff. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. But give your mom grace. Like, she is just doing the best with what she knows, and like, same with my friends who were getting married, who were saying really hurtful things to me about my sex life and whatever. It's like, they don't know what they don't know. And just, it's okay. And just like, give them grace. They're where they are, and I'm where I am, and I'm happy. Maybe they're not happy, but do your best to not fall into the evangelical habit of proselytizing. You actually don't have to change other people. Yeah. And I think in your early days of deconstruction, all of those things are really important, because eventually you'll get to a place where you actually don't care that much, because you genuinely are just good with where you are. There's also, like, in my book, I have a whole bunch of lists of like further reading. There are so many resources now that I didn't have when I was going through it, like podcasts and whatnot. Totally. But I think, let your journey be private to you. And then seek community where you need it, but like, it doesn't have to be a big, loud process and like sharing it with everybody in your family.
I love that. Well, especially, I mean, take it from me. I had a whole podcast called Deconstruction. I was like, I don't do that anymore. So like, I'm like a little bit beyond it. And it's like, eventually you do kind of, I mean, it's still a part of like your life journey, but you do kind of move on. So you don't have to proselytize, which been there, done that. Yeah. And like, I mean, speaking of that though, like, I was going to ask you like how you balance sharing deeply personal and sometimes painful experiences while maintaining your mental and emotional well-being.
I think I learned the difference between privacy and transparency. For example, which I didn't know in the beginning when I was first sharing, right? Like, I would sort of share things pretty much for shock factor, like, but I don't know, like, does the dude's dick size actually matter to the story? Like, is that an important detail, or can we brush over it? That's not really important. If it is important because the point of the story is to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be telling women to save themselves until marriage because like certain bodies don't go together and you should know that before you commit to life with a person.
Right.
Sure. Then it's an important detail. Otherwise, like I'm sort of like telling something about someone else that really isn't anyone's business. But transparency, I think, is different. And then just really honing in on what are the details of this story that need to be shared for the purpose of the story, and not, and always being centered on what I learned and how I grew from it, instead of highlighting the other person in the story and like all the things they did wrong to me. And, you know, I think those have been really good tools for my writing. And the other thing is I have a rule that I don't write publicly about anything until I'm at least a year out of it.
Okay.
Because I need to give it time to marinate. I don't think you should be writing about something when you're in the height of it. Yeah. So now, like a lot of this
posting it like publicly, like you can write about it, but maybe just keep that in your journal until you're like,
or just share with my friends, and you know, like I don't have to. And I do think like the nature of what I do, people really feel like they know me personally,
totally.
But they don't. Like they know they know parts of me, right? Because of my writing, but they don't know me fully. And I think that that is something that every person who is sharing about their life on the internet probably comes up against. Like even when I watch Sex and the City and I'm listening to what Carrie is writing, I'm like, how are all of her friends in her life just okay with this? Like, she just talks about their lives like publicly all the time. And I don't know, like if I were Aiden, I'd be pissed, you know? And so and with I think with my own mental health, like you said, I just wait until I'm at least a year out of it. Like there are pretty big stories from my life that happened in 2019, right before the pandemic, that I haven't written about yet, pretty much because I've been focusing on my book and other things. But I want to share about those things. I just haven't gotten to them yet.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good practice. I mean, you have boundaries set in place, and that's, I think, important when you're doing memoir type, like publicly posting, like writing and book and the series. And it's like, it's about you. It's your life. You need some parameters set in place. I think that's really healthy.
Totally. And with the TV show, like a lot of it is based in truth, like especially the pilot, which I'm screening publicly for the first time at my book launch party, which is really exciting.
Very fun.
Yes. That a lot of it is very factual, based in truth, but I'm also like, I understand that good cinema writing, like you have to be willing to let go of exactly how it happened, you know, and you have to like throw in other things for the sake of the flow, you know, and the medium, because writing a TV show is different than writing a book.
Right. Yeah. No, totally makes sense. I'm as a semi-retired songwriter, I understand.
Yes.
I'm like, I want to write it like word for word how it happened. I'm like, that doesn't always work out in the song. So totally get it. Okay. No, I want to go into like the thing for the girlies. All right. So, I want to talk about your relationship a little bit that you're in now and kind of like how you got there. So, I mean, I'm going to read what you wrote. So you mentioned that your current partner is a fine ass dude, bro, guitar playing tech nerd, New Jersey Italian. So I love the description. I love it. That's why I'm like, this is for the girlies. How did you guys meet? And what is like, tell me about like your journey, like to find that happy, healthy relationship in New York City.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. He'll actually listen to this one because he's like got a little highlight moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken is his name, which makes it all the better given the Barbie movie hype. We have a welcome mat that says, welcome to our Mojo Dojo Casa house where everyone is Knuff.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
I know. So how did Ken and I meet? So, well, let me backtrack a little. We met on Hinge in 2 years ago. So yeah, that's how we met, which I know is not like sexy or anything, but you know, welcome to 2024. Like,
Right.
And I could talk ad nauseum about how to use apps to your advantage and like not to get, I mean, dating is exhausting in many ways, but how to take care of yourself through it and how to be more intentional with it. But before that, I will say I had like my first, I guess like serious relationship in my adult life, like post-college in 2016. But he was from Romania. We had met on a performance contract. And so we were really only together for like 6 months. And then the other 6 months we were trying to figure out, are we going to make this happen or whatever? So we didn't really get to do like the full life together experience. Right. And then I didn't have another serious boyfriend until like 2019. And then he pretty much love bombed me, which not pretty much, like he fully love bombed me. And, you know, I remember, I just want to say really quickly, like through that, I didn't really like him initially. Like I felt he was interesting and I could definitely tell he was into me, but I would tell everyone how he was treating me and the things that he was doing. And they'd be like, oh my God, Mattie Jo, like this is everything you've ever wanted. And now you're just going to be like, oh, you don't like him because you don't think he's that cute. And so they would make me feel bad about it. And I was like, okay, maybe I need to open myself up and like really give this guy a chance. So about a month into dating, I felt like, okay, I do actually like him and we can move this forward. And then in the end, it was like, of course he was doing everything I wanted. It was all a show, you know, because then he like dumped me really quickly and then moved away right after he had met my family. And I don't usually talk shit on exes. I am, and I have done my fair share of like, it's totally fine. He was just doing what he needed to do, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But he love bombed me. And then like now looking back, I can say like he was just treating me the way I should always expect to be treated, which is like with generosity and kindness and interest. That shouldn't have been special, you know?
Totally. Totally.
Anyway, he met my family and then dumped me like 3 weeks later. It's fine. And then it really is fine. I'm just saying that was a big thing. And then I went, the pandemic happened. I had like an accidental pandemic boyfriend and that was not great, but it was definitely out of desperation. And then I dated like really great guys through like the 2020. There were a couple of really great experiences that I had like 2020 to 2021. And then I landed in this like long-term situationship with a guy. And I learned so much through that process. I felt like I really got to practice some relational stuff.
Yeah.
Not without its frustrations and emotional exhaustion because it was a situationship. So there was no commitment, but we were sort of acting like boyfriend and girlfriend without the label, which is, again, I could talk ad nauseum about that. But all that to be said, I feel like I have covered the gamut of at least like straight people, monogamous, different relationships. Just because I haven't explored outside of that. Yeah. So by the time I met Ken, I genuinely felt like I was just like, I'm not open to anything other than real deal commitment. Yeah. I don't care if he's just been divorced. I don't care if he just lost a parent. I don't care if his cat just died. Like, I don't care. Yeah. All of his reasons for not wanting commitment, it doesn't matter to me. The second he shows that, it's done, it's over. I just wasn't open to anything else. And so, and I can't, like, to some of my single friends who ask, I'm like, you can't really manufacture that feeling. It's just either there or it isn't. You just get to that place and then you're there. Yeah. At least that was my experience. So when Ken and I met, we were both just very much in a place of wanting the same thing. And so, and we were both in a similar place in life, and he had zero red flags, like only green flags. I mean, I always say like the last step to me, like really deciding if I liked him was I had to see his apartment.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
totally.
I went to his apartment. Yeah. Because I had made that mistake before, like deciding that I liked a guy and then seeing his apartment and being like, yikes. Like,
yeah, for real.
All you have on the wall is like a Rangers poster and like a couch from a thrift store. Like, you're 32, get your life together, man. Yeah. Just because to me that shows that you expect the woman to come in and like
make your life.
Make it clean. Like, okay, there's dog hair everywhere, you know? So anyways, Ken lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Upper Manhattan, which I found very good on all fronts because it was like, okay, he's clearly got enough money with his job to like have this place, but also he's fiscally responsible because he's not living in like the trendiest New York neighborhood. He's living in one that he can afford, you know? Right. And he had a Roomba. And I was like, he's got a Roomba.
There you go.
We can go.
That's
and
amazing.
Off it went from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we moved very quickly, I will say. Like because of lease stuff that was happening, he invited me to move in with him like 2 months after we were dating, and we've been living together ever since. And it definitely has not been without its difficulties, because this is like my first time ever living with a partner, and you know, just really being with someone who views me as an equal, which like, ladies, be careful what you wish for, because if they really do, that comes with its fair share of like annoying stuff too, you know?
That's true.
I do love that he sees me. He really does like so respect me and so believes in me. And I just really love our relationship. He is like, we have a very, very strong companionship that I don't think I realized like just how important that is in a relationship, because none of my other relationships had ever gotten there before. Yeah. So
is that like, what would you say is like the biggest lesson you learned then through like a lot of your dating about yourself? So whenever you got to like dating Ken, it's like, was there something that you learned through that, all those experiences, and like how that, you know, influenced your approach to your relationships now?
First of all, I'm not always right, which is really humbling.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I really love to believe that I am always right. Yep. And I think, but through the dating stuff, I think what I realized that I need someone who really admires and believes in the work that I do, and who really they don't have to understand like what it was like to be an evangelical, but understands like what I am doing and finds it really important, because, you know, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I have a lot of, and then like my day job is I'm a babysitter for billionaires. So it's like, I have to be with the kind of guy who believes in what I'm doing, who gets and thinks it's really amazing and gets it, right? And Ken definitely does, because I'd gone on dates with other guys who I think just thought like, well, when are you going to get a real job, kind of thing, like, or like, how long are you going to try this? Like, do you have like a point where you'll like give up? And I'm like, do you know that people win Oscars when they're like 87? Fuck off, you know?
Yeah,
like,
for real, yeah.
Or do you have any understanding of how long it takes to get your footing in either writing or acting industry? Like, you know, whereas Ken really, I mean, he sees how hard I work, right? And he respects the hell out of it. So I think that was a big thing. And then also another thing that I learned, and this comes up for a lot of single women who chat with me about like feeling like they slept with a guy too soon or whatever, like feeling like the guy feels some kind of way about their sexual expression. Yeah. And I just had to get to a place with me where I was like, I'm fine with my sexual expression. So like, I just don't sleep with men who exemplify any sort of qualms with it. And for so many men, it was like, oh, will you like write about this on the internet or like whatever? And with Ken, he had read my blogs before we met up, and like nothing was an issue for him. He was just like, yeah, it seems like what you're doing is like really important. Yeah, you know, that's great. Stuff like that I was like, I just know I need this. And then the other thing was I needed someone who really grounds me, because I am so, like, I heard on one of your podcasts, like you're Virgo and you're very like, you know, like, we're very ambitious, motivated people.
Are you also a Virgo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, that's an important detail. But I needed someone who grounded me, because I had been with other very ambitious men, and it always felt like I was competing with them, and or like what I was doing, if they were surpassing it in a way, like what I was doing wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And so I really needed someone who was just like a different pace.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm really glad you shared some of your other like dating stories too, because that was like interesting to me, and I know interesting to the listeners as well. But I do want to kind of talk and wrap up and talk about your book that's coming out. I know we've talked all about it kind of all throughout. And you did mention like in this book, in the next book, you'll have like some of the things with your eating disorder, things like that. But for this book, what are like your main things that you're talking about? Like dating, obviously sex, God, and rich people, right? So like what can people expect, even from our conversation, like what can people expect to hear more of, more in depth of, and just kind of give you a little spiel of the book?
Yeah. So there's like the book I wrote, and then there's the book now zoomed out that I like wish I would have written, which every writer feels that way, because like the process of book writing, right, is you submit your first draft like 2 years before it comes out, right? So who you are in that 2 years, like I met Ken between now and you know, when I submitted it is like just very different what I've gone through. But this book is really a detailed goings on of my first like 3 years of deconstruction. So from, you know, my time in college, it talks a lot about my time in college and gives a really decent background of like the culture of evangelicalism and how involved I was in it. Like, cause I was in missions groups and the things I heard while I was in those groups and whatever. And then my transition to New York City, moving in with the rich people and then working with the rich people. The one thing I wish I would have done a little bit more is sprinkled a little bit of my like babysitting for rich kids in there, but they are there. They're just like not like super highlighted, I guess.
Maybe you just make it a TikTok series.
Yeah, exactly. And then really those like first 3 years of really breaking down scripture, really breaking down what we're told to be absolute truths and that actually turned out to just be like lies. And then sort of the internal shift that happened that had to happen for me to like really change the narratives in my life, right? Like I talked about having to change what I was saying to myself about my body, having to rewire how I talk to myself about just like being bad. Because what I didn't realize is that until, really like 2016, and I started like reading Brene Brown and self-help books, is that so much of my life I was just reacting. I didn't know that I had any sort of power. And so it talks about my sort of personal development overhaul that I went through as well. And then it lands in 2016. And in this book, I don't go super into my story of date rape and all of that, because it just felt like a totally other book. I was like, I feel like there's this chunk of my life that happened, and then I'm going to have to write another book for that chunk. Yeah. Because I don't think I could have gone through, like, I don't think I would have gotten to the other side of really dating positively and having really amazing sexual experiences unless I got sexual trauma therapy. And it just felt like a whole different book.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, great. I love that. So then how can like our community of Curious Cuties support you and your work, especially with the book launch coming soon?
Yes. So follow me at Mattie Jo Cowsert on Instagram. That's where I'm at the most. You can also go to mattiejocowsert.com, put in your email to subscribe for the latest book updates. That'll also subscribe you to the blog. And so anytime a new blog post comes out, you know, it'll be in your email inbox, but I'm not writing super often right now, so I won't be spamming you or anything. But you can also go to my blog page, which is mattiejocowsert.com, / God, Sex, and Rich People, or / I don't know. You figure it out. You can just Google God, Sex, and Rich People. There's a slash. Yeah. And you can just go through. There are all those blog posts there. And then I also have, if you DM me on Instagram, I can give you a reader starter pack that you can start reading to kind of give you a sneak peek of like what my writing style is and what to expect in the book. But it also helps you sort of see like, you know, whatever you're going through, I think you can read in this order, these blog posts, and they'll be very helpful. And then my book comes out September 10th. So the best way, I'm not doing pre-orders. So what we're doing instead is just telling everybody, buy the book the day it comes out, set an alarm on your phone. It's going to be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere you buy books online. And buy it on the day that it goes live, because what we're trying to do is like hit a bestseller by getting all of those on the day that it goes live.
You have a Virgo book launch too.
Yes. I did that on purpose. And my book launch party is happening on September 13th, which is my actual birthday, which is very exciting.
That's my dad's birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's such a good
birthday.
one. And it happens on a Friday. So that'll hopefully not be unlucky.
No. Yeah.
And
extra magical.
Yes. And stay tuned again, like sign up for those email updates, because stay tuned for the actual event updates, because it's being hosted at it'll be hosted in New York City. We're still finalizing those details, but we have a pretty exciting potential host. So stay tuned for that, and we'll have all the details there, because that's going to be open to the public as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, we definitely have listeners in New York City, so hopefully they'll show up to the launch party. That'd be so great. Very excited for you. I do have one last question, because I do ask everyone this question.
Please.
What role does curiosity play in your life?
Brene Brown talks about curiosity in Atlas of the Heart, and how it is it is one of the most important qualities to have as a person who wants to live out empathy and humility and growth and change in your life. And I feel like I learned that from my dad. My dad is a deeply curious person. He is always learning and growing. And I think it's one of the reasons why, even though he comes from a pastoral background, he's not fallen into like the Trump blah, blah, blah BS. Like he's just too evolved for it, to be honest. He now works in education, and he pioneers a lot of new work in education in rural Missouri. And so anyway, I feel like, the role it plays in my life is that it helps me stay empathetic, humble, growth oriented, and actually affecting change in myself, right? Because if you're not curious about yourself or the world, then how can you learn and grow and be open to new people and new ideas? And I think as we get older, that gets harder. Like I'm still like looking at Gen Z, like, ugh, not these socks, but if I can, be open, talk to younger people, then it's nothing but a hugely powerful tool to just, I think, all around be a person that makes the world better.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, thank you so much for being on Curiosity. I know the Curious Cuties will love you. I'll be sure to obviously put all of your links, everything in the show notes so everybody can find you. And everybody, mark your calendar, September 10th. That's when the book is out. So definitely be staying tuned for that. Thank you, Mattie, so much for being a part. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Oh, of course.